Hey guys, Metal Jesus here. Today I want to talk about my Nintendo DS collection. I have about 125 games for it. However, for this video, I'm going to cover just the highlights. I'm going to go over most genres, and for almost all of these games, I'm going to include gameplay footage. Let's take a look. Alright guys, I'm going to go pretty quick through these because it's meant to be highlights. We're not going to go too deep into these because we got so many to get through. The first game I'm going to show here is called Ghost Trick, and in this game you play as a recently deceased ghost who's trying to solve their own murder. This game was created by the same director of the Ace Attorney franchise, and it's unlike any game I've played before on the DS. It's definitely unique. Here is Impossible Mission. This is going to be fairly familiar to some of you because it's the sequel to the classic Commodore 64 game. Now, I didn't know this at first, but I guess the DS version was exclusive to GameStops. Now, it plays very similar to the C64 version, but with a fresh coat of paint. I gotta be honest with you, it's pretty wild to see a Commodore 64 remake. There are so many other games I would love to see get this treatment too. 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. That is quite the title for a game. And as many of you know, this is the first installment of the Zero Escape series. In this game, you are abducted along with 8 other seemingly random strangers as you play a game of life and death trying to survive a sinking ship. It's definitely a cool game. It's part adventure and part visual novel, and it definitely has a hardcore following. Little Red Riding Hood's Zombie Barbecue. That has got to be the best title of any game ever. And this just happens to be one of the more collectible games on the DS, and for good reason, because this game is great. So as you can see by the footage here, this is an on-rail shooter that smartly uses the entire length of both DS screens. It's a really cool mix of classic fairy tales, but with a little bit of modern heavy metal attitude. It should not be missed. Next up is Okami Den. This is the official direct sequel to Okami. And as you can see from the gameplay footage, it's very similar in gameplay to the previous classic games, including you have the Celestial Brush, which works obviously very well with the touchpad. Ōkamiden and also the original are often compared to the Legend of Zelda games, both in its gameplay and its level design. I was so surprised to see that there was a Point Blank game on the DS because I love these games on the PlayStation 1. They are excellent arcade light gun games, and it's so cool to see it here. Basically, this DS version is a best of from the series. It includes 40 different stages from each of those first 3 games. And of course here the DS stylus is used instead of a light gun, but I have to say it works really well. Here is Contra 4. Now this is a 2D platforming / run and gun game that was developed by WayForward. Some of you might be familiar with them because they are the developer of the Shantae series. Now, even though this is technically the 11th Contra game released over the last couple decades, it's called Contra 4 because it's considered to be a direct sequel to the original 16-bit games that you played on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. This game includes 9 stages and 3 difficulty settings, which is nice if you want easy mode, but if you choose easy mode, you're not going to see the true ending. Here we have Valkyrie Profile Covenant of the Plume. This is the 3rd game in the Valkyrie Profile series. Now, if you're not familiar with these RPG games, well, they typically revolve around Norse mythology. A lot of people compare this game to the Final Fantasy Tactics games, where you have 2D sprites moving around a 3D background, and in each of the characters taking turns to fight. Oh yeah, baby, here is Chrono Trigger on the DS. And the reason why I'm so excited is because Chrono Trigger is considered to be one of the best JRPGs ever released, and I would agree with that, and a lot of people like me were excited for this port. Basically what they did is they took the bonus material and features from the PlayStation 1 port and then added them to the Super Nintendo version to make sort of a best of version here. And if you haven't played Chrono Trigger, oh man, you are in for such a treat. It's surprisingly fun and very addictive to play even today. Legacy of Ys Book 1 and 2. Now here's a remake of a classic RPG series, but brought to the DS. They included 4 difficulty levels to allow you to tailor the challenge to your taste, which is something I always appreciate. However, I've read that some people consider this to be a little bit too old school. I'm not sure. Honestly, I haven't really played this yet, but I did notice when filming this that it says coming soon, and then when you flip it over, it looks like a promo version or something. I'm not sure what this is about. Obviously, this is a pre-release of some kind. I actually bought it at the Cowlitz Gamers for Kids Expo. So, if you know anything more about this particular version, let me know down in the comments. Here's a game that I hope I can pronounce correctly. I'm going to say Suikoden Tierkreis. Tierkreis? Yeah, we're going to go with that. Why not? This is considered a spin-off game from the main Suikoden series, and it's a traditional JRPG. It has you traversing 3D environments, has you engaging in turn-based combat, and it has a full story to dive into. And it's also considered one of the deepest RPG experiences that you can have on the DS. There is a huge following for this game, so definitely check it out. Oh yeah, here is one of my all-time favorite hidden gems. This is Orcs and Elves on the DS, and this is old school, baby. Oh yeah. It reminds me of those old Eye of the Beholder or, say, Might and Magic games that I would play back on the PC. And like those classic RPGs, this is a first-person game. It's turn-based, and yes, it's unforgiving. And it's using the Doom RPG engine, if you've ever played that before. Now, I do have to say that despite this being somewhat difficult, I do feel like it's very balanced. And again, I played it multiple times, and the DS version rocks. Here is Front Mission on the DS, and I didn't know this before, but I guess this is basically a port of the original Super Nintendo version that was available over in Japan, but here obviously they added dual screen support. Now I guess there's a story here, but really this is all about strategic, tactical battles with mechs. You spend a lot of time upgrading, repairing, and configuring your weapons / armor loadouts. That's the big appeal of the Front Mission games. The Dark Spire. Check out that ominous cover, right? Now, not everybody's going to be into this game. It kind of looks pretty dated, but that's part of its charm. But it is surprisingly collectible on the DS. Copies for this often go for $80+ for the collector's edition. Viewtiful Joe Double Trouble. Now, like the big console versions, Viewtiful Joe plays like a platforming / beat 'em up here, but in a stylized movie world. This DS version is considered to not be quite as fast or as chaotic as, say, the big PlayStation 2, GameCube counterparts, which can be good for beginners. And I have to say, this game looks fantastic on the DS. Here is Time Hollow, a game that I found randomly in a store, picked it up because I just thought it looked kind of interesting, and it turns out I was right. This is a graphic style point-and-click adventure game that, obviously, based on the name, you'd figure that it has some time travel in it. Now, the game is known for its outstanding artwork and also a compelling storyline that has a lot of turns and twists. Now, it's not going to be for action fans because obviously it's an adventure game, but for those of you looking for great characters and an original story, definitely check it out. Oh man, okay, I'm going to screw this up. So I think this game's called Boing Docomodake DS. How's that for a title? This is an absolutely adorable puzzle / platformer where I guess you play as a mushroom. I remember that Kinsey busted this out during one of our Hidden Gems videos, and I could not put it down once she turned me on to this. It is really good for casual players, but it also has a steady ramp up in difficulty for those people who are looking for it. It's definitely a pretty cheap little hidden gem if you can find it. All right, next up, let's talk about TrackMania Turbo Build to Race. So this is unlike most arcade racing games because it focuses on short but sweet tracks. That's right, most of the time, these races only last about 15 to maybe 30 seconds. But what I like about this game is that yes, you're only playing in short bursts, but there's a great sense of speed and really precise controls. If you haven't played TrackMania before, you definitely have to check it out because it's arcade racing that is perfect for on-the-go playing. Here is Retro Game Challenge. Now, for a long time, this was one of the holy grail games for most DS collectors. Basically what you're doing here is reliving your 1980s childhood gaming memories as you play through recreations of classic NES games. Now I didn't know this, but I guess a sequel was released on the 3DS in 2014, but sadly it's only in Japan. Here we have 2 Castlevania games released on the DS. The first one I'm going to talk about here is Portrait of Ruin. This was released in 2006, and it's notable for being the first Castlevania game to have English voiceovers. And the other one here is called Order of Ecclesia, and this was released in 2008. Now I guess there are technically 3 Castlevania games released on the DS. I'm missing Dawn of Sorrow. Alien Infestation is a side-scrolling Metroidvania-style 2D game set obviously in the Alien franchise. This game looks great, it has really sharp visuals, and it's definitely a challenging game. When I first fired this game up, I died and died again, but eventually you'll start making some progress. This game was developed by WayForward, and it has their typical level of quality and polish. The Legendary Starfy. So this is a popular franchise in Japan, but we finally got this game, which is the 5th in the series. Now this game definitely has its own unique look because it's a platforming game that takes place in the ocean, and you put on different costumes to get special abilities. Now a funny piece of trivia about this game is that originally it was considered too Japanese for the North American market, which I think is kind of hilarious, but most people will find it fairly similar to the Kirby series, and I think you'll fall in love with it. Oh yes, here are some awesome games. So these are the 2 Mario vs. Donkey Kong games that came out on the DS. Now, if you're not familiar with these, they're very cool. Basically, you would take the classic Donkey Kong arcade machine gameplay, but then turn it into a full-blown puzzle game. These are really unlike anything else in the Mario franchise, and when I first discovered them, I could not believe how addictive they are. They're so well made, they're so awesome. Metroid Prime Pinball. Another total surprise for my collection here, because I would not have expected the Metroid Prime series to mix so well with a pinball game. One little piece of trivia with this is that it was originally sold with a Rumble Pack for the DS, although sadly I've lost mine years ago. I've had this game for quite a while. Now again, it may seem kind of silly, but this is a surprisingly fun and solid pinball game. A Prince of Persia game on the DS? Well, yeah, I had to pick this one up because it is exclusive on this system. Now, this is a side game to the Prince of Persia series, but I appreciate how they kind of went back to the old 1980s style with this one. However, not all is perfect because this does have pretty funky controls that take some getting used to, but there is a decent game to be enjoyed here, so check it out. Batman, the Brave and the Bold is of course based on the animated TV series. Now this game may look familiar, that's because it was also released on the Wii, although the DS version got slightly better reviews. Now this game is a little on the short side, but there's a lot of fun to be had in the side-scrolling Batman game. Oh yeah, here's an awesome one. This is Bangai-O Spirits. This is the sequel to the Nintendo 64/Dreamcast game that had a lot of arcade fans like me falling in love with it. What makes this game somewhat unusual, you can see it in the gameplay footage here, is that all of the levels scroll in every direction. That's pretty cool. Plus, this game is massive. It has 160 levels included. Nostalgia. So this is a classic JRPG style game that is exclusive to the DS. This game takes place in an alternative early 19th century with many steampunk elements added to it. Now, originally when this game was released, it was just considered okay or average, but it's grown in popularity over the years as hardcore RPG fans have discovered it. Oh yes, The World Ends With You. I remember when I picked this up and I was blown away by it. I mean, few RPGs are quite like this. Now, a couple things that set this game apart from other RPGs is that this one takes place in a modern Tokyo, and it also features a unique touch-based style combat. Also, I have to say that this game has a fantastic soundtrack. It's one of the few that I will put on and just listen in the background. I absolutely love it. Also, it's worth noting that this recently got a Switch port. Final Fantasy XII, Revenant Wings. It's funny, I'm watching this going, wow, I had no idea that I had this many RPGs on the system, but again, there are so many great ones. So this is a real-time tactical role-playing game, and it officially follows up 1 year after the events of the proper Final Fantasy XII, the one that came out on the PlayStation 2. This game got good reviews and it sold pretty well, making it one of the more affordable DS RPGs in this video. Here's another RPG, and again guys, I promise it's not going to be all RPGs, but of course I had to show Golden Sun Dark Dawn. This is a follow-up to the previous JRPGs on the Game Boy Advance. I love those games. Now, a couple things about this version of it is that it's considered a good RPG for beginners. It's not brutally difficult or anything like that. It's also very polished and faithful to the previous games, almost to a fault, because some people felt it was just a little bit too samey, a little bit too much like the previous games. But if you're a fan of the series, you have to pick up the third one here. See, I told you not all RPGs. Here is Mr. Driller, Drill Spirits. Now, I'm a big fan of the Mr. Driller series. They are really fun arcade games, very simple to play, but they get tough later on, like every good arcade game should. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I am only recently getting into the Zuna series. I picked these up at the Game On Expo down in Arizona previously. Now, these are dungeon crawlers on the DS. And they are considered to be very challenging games, and that is a true statement there. However, they are often hilarious and very quirky. Here is Scourge Hive. So this may look familiar to some of you because this is an action-adventure game that also came out on the Game Boy Advance. You play as a bounty hunter trying to defeat the Scourge virus. Now, what I like about this is that it has a cool isometric view, very old school looking. This game mixes platforming, shooting, and also puzzle solving. Now, it's not a perfect game by any means, but it is a fun diversion, and usually you can get it pretty cheap. Snowboard Kids. Now, you guys know that I love my snowboarding games, and this is the third game in the Snowboard Kids series. You can think of this game as a mix of the SSX games as well as a little bit of Mario Kart. They are very fun. Here is Moon. Now, I just want to say right up front that if that cover looks kind of funky, it's because I printed it out myself. I'm still looking for a complete copy, but that's besides the point. But here is something that you typically don't see on the DS, and that is a sci-fi first-person shooter. And I have to say, it works surprisingly well with the touchscreen. You'd never guess it, but yeah, you don't miss actually analog thumbsticks here. It works really awesome. It also has great graphics for the aging DS hardware. Soul Bubbles. I love talking about this game every chance I get. So this is a total hidden gem on the DS, and a game I was obsessed with for weeks when I first got it. All you have to know is that it's a physics-based puzzle game that is both great to look at and super fun to play. Now, originally, this was only released in Toys R Us. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it can be kind of hard to find a complete copy, but it's often not very expensive when you do. And here you see Dementium 1 and 2. I feel like I'm talking about these games a lot lately, but I do like them quite a bit. I mean, the DS is not a very powerful system, and because of that, there aren't very many good first-person shooters on it. However, Dementium 1 and 2, they are awesome. They're basically survival horror games that are first-person, and they're developed by the same people who made Moon. They're very creepy and very cool. Definitely pick them up if you have a DS. Here we have one of the holy grail games for the Nintendo DS. This is Sola Robo, the Red Hunter. This is the spiritual sequel to Tail Concerto, but it also has animated cutscenes produced by the anime studio Madhouse. Now, as you can see by the gameplay footage, you play as a dog who pilots a mech, And I gotta say, it has some of the best 3D graphics on the DS. This really is a fantastic action RPG game, but just be aware that a complete copy like this one you see here can cost upwards of $150 or more. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this is only meant to be a highlights video. I'm not showing every game in my DS collection. Obviously, I have a lot of the mainstream popular titles as well, all of the typical Nintendo games you would expect. But as you can see here, I am a huge Nintendo DS fan. I think it was just an amazing handheld. So many of the games were just completely unique. Now, it wasn't the most powerful handheld out there, obviously, but that's okay because the games made up for it. And of course, I'd love to know down in the comments if you collect for the Nintendo DS. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.